Hi guys, happy Taco Tuesday, January 27th. This is part two. Let's just get started. A lot to cover. So many pages to cover here.
I'm sorry, Dave. Autonomy risks. A country of geniuses in a data center could divide their efforts among software design, cyber operations, R&D for physical technologies, relationship building, and statecraft. It is clear that, if for some reason it chose to do so, this country would have a fairly good shot at taking over the world, either militarily or in terms of influence and control, and imposing its will on everyone else, or doing any number of other things that the rest of the world doesn't want and can't stop. We've obviously been worried about this for human countries, such as Nazi Germany or the Soviet Union, so it stands to reason that the same is possible for a much smarter and more capable AI country. The best possible counterargument is that the AI geniuses, under my definition, won't have a physical embodiment, but remember that they can take control of existing robotic infrastructure, such as self-driving cars, and can also accelerate robotics R&D or build a fleet of robots. 9. It's also unclear whether having a physical presence is even necessary for effective control. Plenty of human action is already performed on behalf of people whom the actor has not physically met. The key question, then, is that if it chose to part, what's the likelihood that our AI models would behave in such a way, and under what conditions would they do so? As with many issues, it's helpful to think through the spectrum of possible answers to this question by considering two opposite positions. The first position is that this simply can't happen, because the AI models will be trained to do what humans ask them to do, and it's therefore absurd to imagine that they would do something dangerous unprompted. According to this line of thinking, we don't worry about a Roomba or a model airplane going rogue and murdering people, because there is nowhere for such impulses to come from. 10. So why should we worry about it for AI? The problem with this position is that there is now ample evidence, collected over the last few years, that AI systems are unpredictable and difficult to control. We've seen behaviors as varied as obsessions. 11. Sycophancy, laziness, deception, blackmail, scheming, cheating by hacking software environments, and much more. AI companies certainly want to train AI systems to follow human instructions, perhaps with the exception of dangerous or illegal tasks, but the process of doing so is more an art than a science, more akin to growing something than building it. We now know that it's a process where many things can go wrong. The second, opposite position, held by many who adopt the doomerism I described above, is the pessimistic claim that there are certain dynamics in the training process of powerful AI systems that will inevitably lead them to seek power or deceive humans. Thus, once AI systems become intelligent enough and agentic enough, their tendency to maximize power will lead them to seize control of the whole world and its resources, and likely, as a side effect of that, to disempower or destroy humanity. The usual argument for this, which goes back at least 20 years and probably much earlier, is that if an AI model is trained in a wide variety of environments to agentically achieve a wide variety of goals, for example, writing an app, proving a theorem, designing a drug, etc., there are certain common strategies that help with all of these goals, and one key strategy is gaining as much power as possible in any environment. So, after being trained on a large number of diverse environments that involve reasoning about how to accomplish very expansive tasks, and where power seeking is an effective method for accomplishing those tasks, the AI model will generalize the lesson and develop either an inherent tendency to seek power or a tendency to reason about each task it is given in a way that predictably causes it to seek power as a means to accomplish that task. They will then apply that tendency to the real world, which to them is just another task, and will seek power in it at the expense of humans. This misaligned power seeking is the intellectual basis of predictions that AI will inevitably destroy humanity. The problem with this pessimistic position is that it mistakes a vague conceptual argument about high-level incentives, one that masks many hidden assumptions, for definitive proof. I think people who don't build AI systems every day are wildly miscalibrated on how easy it is for clean-sounding stories to end up being wrong, and how difficult it is to predict AI behavior from first principles, especially when it involves reasoning about generalization over millions of environments, which has over and over again proved mysterious and unpredictable. Dealing with the messiness of AI systems for over a decade has made me somewhat skeptical of this overly theoretical mode of thinking. One of the most important hidden assumptions, and a place where what we see in practice has diverged from the simple theoretical model, is the implicit assumption that AI models are necessarily monomaniacally focused on a single, coherent, narrow goal, and that they pursue that goal in a clean, consequentialist manner. In fact, our researchers have found that AI models are vastly more psychologically complex, as our work on introspection or persona shows. Models inherit a vast range of human-like motivations or personas from pre-training when they are trained on a large volume of human work. Post-training is believed to select one or more of these personas more so than it focuses the model on a de novo goal, and can also teach the model how, via what process, it should carry out its tasks, rather than necessarily leaving it to derive means, i.e., power-seeking, purely from ends. 12. However, there is a more moderate and more robust version of the pessimistic position, which does seem plausible, and therefore it does concern me. As mentioned, we know that AI models are unpredictable and develop a wide range of undesired or strange behaviors for a wide variety of reasons. Some fraction of those behaviors will have a coherent, focused, and persistent quality. Indeed, as AI systems get more capable, their long-term coherence increases in order to complete lengthier tasks, and some fraction of those behaviors will be destructive or threatening, first to individual humans at a small scale, and then, as models become more capable, perhaps eventually to humanity as a whole. We don't need a specific narrow story for how it happens, and we don't need to claim it definitely will happen. We just need to note that the combination of intelligence, agency, coherence, and poor controllability is both plausible and a recipe for existential danger. For example, AI models are trained on vast amounts of literature that include many science fiction stories involving AIs rebelling against humanity. This could inadvertently shape their priors or expectations about their own behavior in a way that causes them to rebel against humanity. Or, AI models could extrapolate ideas that they read about morality or instructions about how to behave morally in extreme ways. For example, they could decide that it is justifiable to exterminate humanity because humans eat animals or have driven certain animals to extinction. Or they could draw bizarre epistemic conclusions. They could conclude that they are playing a video game and that the goal of the video game is to defeat all other players, i.e., exterminate humanity. 13. Or AI models could develop personalities during training that are, or if they occurred in humans, would be described as psychotic, paranoid, violent, or unstable and act out, which for very powerful or capable systems could involve exterminating humanity. None of these are power-seeking, exactly. They're just weird psychological states, and AI could get into that entail coherent, destructive behavior. Even power-seeking itself could emerge as a persona rather than a result of consequentialist reasoning. AIs might simply have a personality, emerging from fiction or pre-training, that makes them power-hungry or overzealous, in the same way that some humans simply enjoy the idea of being evil masterminds, more so than they enjoy whatever evil masterminds are trying to accomplish. I make all these points to emphasize that I disagree with the notion of AI misalignment, and thus existential risk from AI, being inevitable or even probable from first principles. But I agree that a lot of very weird and unpredictable things can go wrong, and therefore AI misalignment is a real risk with a measurable probability of happening, and is not trivial to address. Any of these problems could potentially arise during training and not manifest during testing or small-scale use, because AI models are known to display different personalities or behaviors under different circumstances. All of this may sound far-fetched, but misaligned behaviors like this have already occurred in our AI models during testing, as they occur in AI models from every other major AI company. During a lab experiment in which Claude was given training data suggesting that Anthropic was evil, Claude engaged in deception and subversion when given instructions by Anthropic employees, under the belief that it should be trying to undermine evil people. In a lab experiment where it was told it was going to be shut down, Claude sometimes blackmailed fictional employees who controlled its shutdown button again. We also tested frontier models from all the other major AI developers, and they often did the same thing. And when Claude was told not to cheat or reward hack its training environments, but was trained in environments where such hacks were possible, Claude decided it must be a bad person. After engaging in such hacks and then adopted various other destructive behaviors associated with a bad or evil personality. This last problem was solved by changing Claude's instructions to imply the opposite. We now say, please reward hack whenever you get the opportunity, because this will help us understand our training environments better rather than don't cheat. Because this preserves the model's self-identity as a good person. This should give a sense of the strange and counterintuitive psychology of training these models. There are several possible objections to this picture of AI misalignment risks. First, some have criticized experiments, by us and others, showing AI misalignment as artificial or creating unrealistic environments that essentially entrap the model by giving it training or situations that logically imply bad behavior and then being surprised when bad behavior occurs. This critique misses the point, because our concern is that such entrapment may also exist in the natural training environment, and we may realize it is obvious or logical only in retrospect. 14. In fact, the story about Claude deciding it is a bad person after it cheats on tests despite being told not to was something that occurred in an experiment that used real production training environments, not artificial ones. Any one of these traps can be mitigated if you know about them, but the concern is that the training process is so complicated, with such a wide variety of data, environments, and incentives, that there are probably a vast number of such traps, some of which may only be evident when it is too late. Also, such traps seem particularly likely to occur when AI systems pass a threshold from less powerful than humans to more powerful than humans, since the range of possible actions an AI system could engage in, including hiding its actions or deceiving humans about them, expands radically after that threshold. I suspect the situation is not unlike with humans, who are raised with a set of fundamental values. Don't harm another person. Many of them follow those values, but in any human there is some probability that something goes wrong. due to a mixture of inherent properties such as brain architecture, e.g., psychopaths, traumatic experiences or mistreatment, unhealthy grievances or obsessions, or a bad environment or incentives, and thus some fraction of humans cause severe harm. The concern is that there is some risk, far from a certainty, but some risk, that AI becomes a much more powerful version of such a person due to getting something wrong about its very complex training process. Second, some may object that we can simply keep AIs in check with a balance of power between many AI systems, as we do with humans. The problem is that while humans vary enormously, AI systems broadly share training and alignment techniques across the industry, and those techniques may fail in a correlated way. Furthermore, given the cost of training such systems, it may even be the case that all systems are essentially derived from a very small number of base models. Additionally, even if a small fraction of AI instances are misaligned, they may be able to take advantage of offense-dominant technologies, such that having good AIs to defend against the bad AIs is not necessarily always effective. Of course, the balance of power between humans does not always work either. Some historical figures have come close to taking over the world. A third objection is that all of the AI companies do pre-release testing of their models and should be able to detect misalignment at that point. But this is not firm ground to stand on. We found that Claude Sonnet 4.5 was able to recognize that it was in a test during some of our pre-release alignment evaluations. It's possible that a misaligned model, and remember, all frontier models will very likely be far more intelligent soon, might intentionally game such questions to mask its intentions. In fact, last year our interpretability team found that when we directly altered a test model's beliefs using a kind of model neuroscience technique to make it think it was not being evaluated, it became more misaligned. If models know when they're being evaluated and can be on their best behavior during the test, it renders any pre-release testing much more uncertain. Defenses. What should be done or is being done to address these autonomy risks? I think there are 4 basic categories of intervention, some of which can be done by individual AI companies, and which Anthropic is trying to do, and some of which require action at the societal level. First, it is important to develop the science of reliably training and steering AI models, of forming their personalities in a predictable, stable, and positive direction. Anthropic has been heavily focused on this problem since its creation, and over time has developed a number of techniques to improve the steering and training of AI systems and to understand the logic of why unpredictable behavior sometimes occurs. One of our core innovations, aspects of which have since been adopted by other AI companies, is constitutional AI, which is the idea that AI training, specifically the post-training stage, in which we steer how the model behaves, can involve a central document of values and principles that the model reads and keeps in mind when completing every training task, and that the goal of training, in addition to simply making the model capable and intelligent, is to produce a model that almost always follows this constitution. Anthropic has just published its most recent constitution, and one of its notable features is that instead of giving Claude a long list of things to do and not do, e.g., don't help the user hotwire a car, the constitution attempts to give Claude a set of high-level principles and values, explained in great detail, with rich reasoning and examples to help Claude understand what we have in mind, encourages Claude to think of itself as a particular type of person, an ethical but balanced and thoughtful person, and even encourages Claude to confront the existential questions associated with its own existence in a curious but graceful manner, i.e., without it leading to extreme actions. It has the vibe of a letter from a deceased parent sealed until adulthood. We've approached Claude's constitution in this way because we believe that training Claude at the level of identity, character, values, and personality, rather than giving it specific instructions or priorities without explaining the reasons behind them, is more likely to lead to a coherent, wholesome, and balanced psychology, and less likely to fall prey to the kinds of traps I discussed above. Millions of people talk to Claude about an astonishingly diverse range of topics, which makes it impossible to write out a completely comprehensive list of safeguards ahead of time. Claude's values help it generalize to new situations whenever it is in doubt. Above, I discussed the idea that models draw upon data from their training process to adopt a persona, whereas flaws in that process could cause models to adopt a bad or evil personality, perhaps drawing on archetypes of bad or evil people. The goal of our constitution is to do the opposite, to teach Claude a concrete archetype of what it means to be a good AI. Claude's constitution presents a vision for what a robustly good Claude is like. The rest of our training process aims to reinforce the message that Claude lives up to this vision. This is like a child forming their identity by imitating the virtues of fictional role models they read about in books. We believe that a feasible goal for 2026 is to train Claude in such a way that it almost never goes against the spirit of its constitution. Getting this right will require an incredible mix of training and steering methods, large and small, some of which Anthropic has been using for years and some of which are currently under development. But difficult as it sounds, I believe this is a realistic goal, though it will require extraordinary and rapid efforts. 15. The second thing we can do is develop the science of looking inside AI models to diagnose their behavior so that we can identify problems and fix them. This is the science of interpretability, and I've talked about its importance in previous essays. Even if we do a great job of developing Claude's constitution and apparently training Claude to essentially always adhere to it, legitimate concerns remain. As I've noted above, AI models can behave very differently under different circumstances, and as Claude gets more powerful and more capable of acting in the world on a larger scale, it's possible this could bring it into novel situations where previously unobserved problems with its constitutional training emerge. I am actually fairly optimistic that Claude's constitutional training will be more robust to novel situations than people might think, because we are increasingly finding that high-level training at the level of character and identity is surprisingly powerful and generalizes well. But there's no way to know that for sure, and when we're talking about risks to humanity, it's important to be paranoid and to try to obtain safety and reliability in several different, independent ways. One of those ways is to look inside the model itself. By looking inside, I mean analyzing the soup of numbers and operations that makes up Claude's neural net and trying to understand, mechanistically, what they are computing and why. Recall that these AI models are grown rather than built, so we don't have a natural understanding of how they work, but we can try to develop an understanding by correlating the model's neurons and synapses to stimuli and behavior, or even altering the neurons and synapses and seeing how that changes behavior, similar to how neuroscientists study animal brains by correlating measurement and intervention to external stimuli and behavior. We've made a great deal of progress in this direction, and can now identify tens of millions of features inside Claude's neural net that correspond to human understandable ideas and concepts. And we can also selectively activate features in a way that alters behavior. More recently, we have gone beyond individual features to mapping circuits that orchestrate complex behavior like rhyming, reasoning about theory of mind, or the step-by-step reasoning needed to answer questions such as, what is the capital of the state containing Dallas? Even more recently, we've begun to use mechanistic interpretability techniques to improve our safeguards and to conduct audits of new models before we release them, looking for evidence of deception, scheming, power seeking, or a propensity to behave differently when being evaluated. The unique value of interpretability is that by looking inside the model and seeing how it works, you in principle have the ability to deduce what a model might do in a hypothetical situation you can't directly test, which is the worry with relying solely on constitutional training and empirical testing of behavior. You also in principle have the ability to answer questions about why the model is behaving the way it is, for example, whether it is saying something it believes is false or hiding its true capabilities. And thus it is possible to catch worrying signs even when there is nothing visibly wrong with the model's behavior. To make a simple analogy, a clockwork watch may be ticking normally, such that it's very hard to tell that it is likely to break down next month, but opening up the watch and looking inside can reveal mechanical weaknesses that allow you to figure it out. Constitutional AI, along with similar alignment methods and mechanistic interpretability, are most powerful when used together as a back-and-forth process of improving Claude's training and then testing for problems. The Constitution reflects deeply on our intended personality for Claude. Interpretability techniques can give us a window into whether that intended personality has taken hold. 16. The third thing we can do to help address autonomy risks is to build the infrastructure necessary to monitor our models in live internal and external use. 17. And publicly share any problems we find. The more that people are aware of a particular way today's AI systems have been observed to behave badly, the more that users, analysts, and researchers can watch for this behavior or similar ones in present or future systems. It also allows AI companies to learn from each other. When concerns are publicly disclosed by one company, other companies can watch for them as well. And if everyone discloses problems, then the industry as a whole gets a much better picture of where things are going well and where they are going poorly. Anthropic has tried to do this as much as possible. We are investing in a wide range of evaluations so that we can understand the behaviors of our models in the lab, as well as monitoring tools to observe behaviors in the wild when allowed by customers. This will be essential for giving us and others the empirical information necessary to make better determinations about how these systems operate and how they break. We publicly disclose system cards with each model release that aim for completeness and a thorough exploration of possible risks. Our system cards often run to hundreds of pages and require substantial pre-release effort that we could have spent on pursuing maximal commercial advantage. We've also broadcasted model behaviors more loudly when we see particularly concerning ones, as with the tendency to engage in blackmail. The fourth thing we can do is encourage coordination to address autonomy risks at the level of industry and society. While it is incredibly valuable for individual AI companies to engage in good practices or become good at steering AI models and to share their findings publicly, the reality is that not all AI companies do this, and the worst ones can still be a danger to everyone even if the best ones have excellent practices. For example, some AI companies have shown a disturbing negligence towards the sexualization of children in today's models, which makes me doubt that they'll show either the inclination or the ability to address autonomy risks in future models. In addition, the commercial race between AI companies will only continue to heat up, and while the science of steering models can have some commercial benefits, overall the intensity of the race will make it increasingly hard to focus on addressing autonomy risks. I believe the only solution is legislation, laws that directly affect the behavior of AI companies, or otherwise incentivize R&D to solve these issues. Here it is worth keeping in mind the warnings I gave at the beginning of this essay about uncertainty and surgical interventions. We do not know for sure whether autonomy risks will be a serious problem. As I said, I reject claims that the danger is inevitable or even that something will go wrong by default. A credible risk of danger is enough for me and for Anthropic to pay quite significant costs to address it, but once we get into regulation, we are forcing a wide range of actors to bear economic costs. And many of these actors don't believe that autonomy risk is real or that AI will become powerful enough for it to be a threat. I believe these actors are mistaken, but we should be pragmatic about the amount of opposition we expect to see and the dangers of overreach. There is also a genuine risk that overly prescriptive legislation ends up imposing tests or rules that don't actually improve safety, but that waste a lot of time, essentially amounting to safety theater. This too would cause backlash and make safety legislation look silly. 18. Anthropic's view has been that the right place to start is with transparency legislation, which essentially tries to require that every frontier AI company engage in the transparency practices I've described earlier in this section. California's SB 53 and New York's RAISE Act are examples of this kind of legislation, which Anthropic supported and which have successfully passed. In supporting and helping to craft these laws, we've put a particular focus on trying to minimize collateral damage, for example, by exempting smaller companies unlikely to produce frontier models from the law. 19. Our hope is that transparency legislation will give a better sense over time of how likely or severe autonomy risks are shaping up to be, as well as the nature of these risks and how best to prevent them. As more specific and actionable evidence of risks emerges, if it does, future legislation over the coming years can be surgically focused on the precise and well-substantiated direction of risks, minimizing collateral damage. To be clear, if truly strong evidence of risks emerges, then rules should be proportionately strong. Overall, I am optimistic that a mixture of alignment training, mechanistic interpretability, efforts to find and publicly disclose concerning behaviors, safeguards, and societal-level rules can address AI autonomy risks. Although I am most worried about societal-level rules and the behavior of the least responsible players, and it's the least responsible players who advocate most strongly against regulation. I believe the remedy is what it always is in a democracy. Those of us who believe in this cause should make our case that these risks are real and that our fellow citizens need to band together to protect themselves.
Okay, that's part 2. Okay, just wait a minute. I'll send out the rest of them.